when you look at certain teams, it's easy to see why they're successful. They have the right people in place in the right areas. They make good talent evaluations in the draft, free agency. They manage the salary cap well. There are certain traits and characteristics that the good organizations have, and you see them, and then once you see them, you know that that's an organization that gets it, that's going to be consistently good. Then on the flip side, you see those organizations that don't have those right people in the right places, those organizations that don't get it right, those organizations that don't manage the salary cap well, those organizations that don't do well in free agency, that do a poor job in the draft, and it's not hard to see why they consistently struggle. Well, the Washington Redskins will certainly fit into that second category. Here is a team where the problems start at the highest of the highs, and that's owner Daniel Snyder. This is a guy for years that has tried to pattern himself after Jerry Jones, a guy who, let's face it, for the most part over the past almost 2 decades now, has largely been a failure when it comes to being a football guy as an owner. A guy that doesn't have the qualifications to be able to make those type of football decisions, but thinks because he has billions of dollars and he has bought the team that it's the best interest of the organization and the best thing for all parties involved for him to be heavily involved in all aspects of the football operations. The problems all start with Daniel Snyder. And Washington Redskins fans know this, they understand it, they embrace it. While on the one hand, it's nice to have an owner that is willing to spend money on players and on coaches. Trust me, as a Bears fan, that's something that's very nice. It's a nice luxury that you have as a Redskins fan. The problem is those efforts, those monies, if you will, are not always invested in the right places. And then you go right below him to Bruce Allen, the guy who, frankly, is only a general manager because of his last name. You know, that's it. Because clearly, based off of production and clearly based off of the job he's done, he definitely no longer deserves to be the general manager of the Washington Redskins or any other NFL organization. It's that simple. And then when you look at the constant coaching carousel of the Washington Redskins, all of these coaching changes over the years, going with this big name and that big name, and overpaying for this guy and overpaying for that guy. And what does it really produce? It really doesn't produce all of that much, frankly. Just more inconsistency, more mediocrity, and more bad Redskins football. So I think there maybe was some hope in this offseason that the Redskins were going to change things a little bit and that things were going to get better with the hire of Jay Gruden. Here's a guy that's not one of the big splashy names like a Schottenheimer, a Shanahan, guys like that, a Steve Spurrier, if you will. This is a guy that's a coordinator. This is a guy that understands the offensive side of the football, knowing that you have so much invested in RG3 that you're ultimately going to sink or swim as an organization for years to come based off of the development or lack thereof of RG3. You got to find the guy that can work with him. You got to find the guy that can get more out of him. You got to find the guy that can put RG3 in the best possible situations to succeed so that way RG3 can succeed. Well, the problem is, of course, is that the Washington Redskins ended up hiring Jay Gruden. And as it was established throughout the 2014 season, Jay Gruden doesn't seem to like RG3. It seems like he doesn't want to work with RG3. This is a problem here, a significant problem. You bring in a head coach in part to work with the quarterback that you gave up the farm for in order to get a couple of years ago in the draft. And he doesn't want to work with the guy. He doesn't like the guy. He doesn't respect the guy. And granted, RG3 does stupid things and conducts himself in a manner that can rub people the very wrong way. I don't dispute that at all. But at the end of the day, the dumb dicks in charge, Daniel Snyder, Bruce Allen, hired this asshat in part because they wanted him to be able to get more out of RG3. And he doesn't want to get anything out of RG3 because he doesn't want to work with RG3 and he doesn't want to get RG3 any better. That is so typical of the Washington Redskins. And they've got talent on their team. They have some star players. They're not a loaded roster. They're definitely one of the lesser talented rosters in the NFL. But on offense, you got a guy like Alfred Morris, who had another 1,000-yard rushing season, a very underrated, consistent running back. They brought in Deshaun Jackson. He was their big, splashy offseason move, and he played well. He had a Deshaun Jackson type of season, over 1,100 yards receiving. He made some really big plays. They got some stars on offense. It's not like the talent cupboard is totally bare on the offensive side of the ball for the Washington Redskins. And then even on defense, you bring in Jason Hatcher, and when he played all right. Ryan Kerrigan had 13 and a half sacks. He's one of the more underrated 3-4 outside linebackers in the league, in my opinion. There's some talent on this team, but not nearly enough of it in not nearly enough places. And the biggest problem of all is that when you have uncertainty at the quarterback position, it creates uncertainty all throughout the entire organization. And when you look at 2014, you start off the year with RG3 as your starter, and then he dislocates his ankle in the Jacksonville game. So now you go to Kirk Cousins. Everybody in Redskins land is like, finally, Kirk Cousins is going to show himself to be the guy. We can move on from RG3. We'll re-sign Cousins long-term after this great season where he leads us to the playoffs, and it's all going to be kumbaya and skip to buff fucking Lou. Except once Cousins got in there, he proved himself to be a turnover-prone machine, the likes of which Jay Cutler even says, dog, you get the INT better than I do. So they eventually bench him in favor of Colt McCoy. When you get to the point where you're on your third starting quarterback for the season, and only one of those previous two quarterbacks got hurt, the other one got benched just because of poor performance in play, you're in a bad way. Again, I emphasize the Redskins had to go to Colt McCoy. And then they go to Colt McCoy, leads them to a victory on Monday night over the Dallas Cowboys. And it even seems like then Jay Gruden doesn't like Colt McCoy. Why are you playing these guys if you don't fucking like these guys? Why did you take this job if you knew those were going to be the quarterbacks you had to work with in 2014 and you clearly didn't seem to want to work with any of them? That makes absolutely no sense. And then you get to the point where the Redskins season is clearly over. They are one of the worst teams in the league. So for whatever reason, Jay Gruden, instead of going back to RG3, who is now healthy, and you need to find out as an organization if he's going to be that answer long-term or not, he sets his organization back potentially for years because he is a dumbass that was hired by a dumbass in Bruce Allen, who was hired by a dumbass himself in Daniel Snyder to do these type of dumbass things. He sits there and continues to start Colt McCoy because that's going to benefit the organization in any way, shape, or form long-term. I mean, I get that Jay Gruden was probably in fear that he might have been a one-and-done coach, and he probably should have been because of the way he mismanaged this team, the way he was sitting there and giving up on RG3. He frankly gave up on Kirk Cousins, I think, far too soon, and made a knee-jerk reflex reaction to McCoy. And then when McCoy clearly isn't playing that well and it can't really get any worse with RG3, he still tries to hang on to McCoy as long as he possibly can until McCoy gets fucking hurt. And then he decides, I guess I'll go back to RG3. This is the type of stupid shit that the Redskins organization does. That's why I was surprised to see that the organization and Jim Haslett had decided to mutually part ways. I thought Bruce Allen and Daniel Snyder loved having Jim Haslett there because they decided for whatever reason when they fired Shanahan to keep Jim Haslett around. This guy is not a great defensive mind by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe they just like having their stool pigeon, their snitch in the coaching staff so that way he could report up to the higher-ups what was going on. And it's just a dysfunctional fuck of an organization if there ever has been one. They're not the worst organization in the league, though. That's what's funny about it. But they're bad. They're one of the worst and one of the most poorly run. You look at them offensively this past season. 26 in points scored. 30th in third down percentage. 58 sacks allowed. Just bad. It's bad. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. It was just bad. Defensively, the 30th in points allowed. When you don't score that many points and you're giving up a shit ton of points, it's not hard to figure out why you end up finishing a season 4-12. Funny thing is, though, even with that being said, they beat the Cowboys, a team that ended up going 12-4, in Dallas on Monday night with their third-string quarterback. And then in Week 16, they beat Philadelphia and knocked them out of the playoffs. 2 of their 4 wins are against a team with 12 wins that won the division, and another team that had 10 wins that in any other year probably does make the playoffs in the Philadelphia Eagles. But then again, they had 8 games where they scored 17 points or less. They had 3 games where they gave up over 40 points. So they were getting boat raced sometimes in bad ways. This organization is in bad shape. And the major reason this organization is in bad shape is they are still paying the price for the RG3 trade. There's no question that trade set the organization back for years. It's not even just the fact that RG3 has not progressed, has not developed, and has not proven himself to be that guy. It's just when you give up that many premium draft choices, man, that really puts a lot of pressure on you to hit in the lower middle rounds, hit in free agency, really develop the talent that you have. And if you can't hit in some or all of those areas, you're really going to struggle. And it's really hard for a guy like an RG3 to be successful in that type of situation because where you would have, first round picks maybe in 2013, 2014 that you can use to reinforce the offense to help support RG3, those picks are non-existent because you had to give them up to get an RG3. They're still paying that price for that trade, and they're probably going to pay it for a few more seasons to come. When you look at the moves they made in the offseason, they did bring in Deshaun Jackson, and he was a good player. He was a nice asset to them. And they brought in Jason Hatcher. I thought he played well at times. Andre Roberts was an okay number 3 option, but for the draft failures they've had in recent years and just how talent deficient this overall roster is, they needed far more moves to really pan out than what really did. And then when you look at the draft, Trent Murphy, I think, will be an okay player, but he certainly was nothing special. And they really got nothing else out of this draft class, just like they didn't get anything out of last year's draft class for the most part. That's a problem. They just don't have enough production coming out of their draft classes. And the biggest, most successful way to build a winner in the National Football League is what, everybody? Building your team through the NFL draft. You struggle in the draft, you struggle as an organization. Can we see the blessed correlation here? Exactly. So team needs. When we look at this Redskins organization and what they need to do this offseason, the first thing they need to do, in my opinion, is they need to go all in with RG3 in 2015. It'll be year number 4. You're probably not going to pick up his 5th-year option. But you need to know, and you need to find out sooner rather than later whether this guy is going to be the long-term answer for you or not. If you've already made that determination that he's not, then don't keep him. Trade him, cut him, do something, get rid of him. Do not leave it as a potential albatross hanging over this organization all offseason and all next season long. But if you're not going to get rid of RG3, then it must be clearly understood at all levels of the organization, from Daniel Snyder on down to Jay Gruden, that you were going to go with RG3, you were going to start RG3, and you were going to play RG3 until the wheels fucking fall off in 2015, because you must know you gave up such a premium price in terms of draft picks to be able to get this guy. You have put so much into this guy, you have to see if it is ever going to pay off or not. So that way after 2015, if you need to move on as an organization at the quarterback position, at head coach, general manager, I'm sure Redskins fans would hope owner as well, you got to go all in with RG3, period. And that also means that should influence your offseason moves. The Redskins have to get better on offense. People look at like Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon and Andre Roberts and even Jordan Reed at tight end, Niles Paul, and they'll be like, oh, they've got some nice weapons. And they've got some nice weapons, but they still need a big physical number 1 type of wide receiver that would allow Deshaun Jackson to be able to slide into the slot. They don't have that guy on the roster. They need help desperately on that offensive line as well. They need help at tackle. They need help at guard. They need help at center. They give up 58 sacks. That offensive line was terrible. This is not the Hogs of yesteryear, that's for damn sure. No quarterback was going to sit there and really, truly enjoy a lot of success behind that crappy offensive line in 2014. I don't care who the hell it was. You've got to improve that offensive line. Trent Williams is not a long-term answer at left tackle. I personally don't believe, and you really don't have anything else on that line. How do you expect any quarterback to be successful when they're always constantly under siege? And then defensively, they got to find a way to get better in the back half of that defense in the secondary, because that's been a weakness for years. They're really young there, and they're not very good there, frankly. A lot of needs for a bad team. Unfortunately, Redskins fans, you just can't go and find a new owner, because that's where the biggest problem lies. Until that situation is addressed, I don't know if these things are ever going to get any better or not. But the best way that things could get better in 2015 is for this organization to make a decision. If they don't want RG3 anymore, they get rid of him. Don't perpetuate the problem. If they want him and they're going to keep him, then they need to go fucking all in with him and then go get some reinforcements and go get some help. They've got a high draft pick in the first round. They're picking 5th overall. Now it's time to go help this guy and see if RG3 could be the answer or not.